Open almost any history of Western thought, and Plato stands at the very dawn. The philosopher Alfred North Whitehead put it most famously: the safest characterization of the whole European philosophical tradition, as he put it, is that it is a series of footnotes to Plato. Everything seems to begin with him: logic, politics, beauty, the soul itself. He appears to spring into the world fully formed, like the goddess Athena, leaping out armed from the head of Zeus, the pure, spontaneous origin of reason. But what if we have had it backwards all along? What if Plato is not the dawn, but the dusk? Not the first voice of a new world, but the last great voice of a very old one? Look closely at him, and he is not a beginning at all. He is an ending, the culmination of a tradition already some 25 centuries old by the time he set down a word. The last archaic man. It is hard to do justice to what Plato achieved. Across his dialogues, he attempts an account of the entire cosmos and of every smaller world folded inside it. He neglects nothing, not myth, not logic, not one corner of the philosophical enterprise. His work is a survey of nearly everything a human being can think, and his influence pours down the centuries, through Augustine, through the Middle Ages, through the German idealists. Survey the whole of Western thought, and his fingerprints are everywhere. In all of this, yes, he truly is a beginning. And yet, he is also an end. At the same moment that he opens Western speculation, he completes something far more ancient: an intellectual, a religious, and a political tradition reaching back thousands of years. In one real sense, his greatest achievement is to take that old world and lift it to its highest point. To see how, we have to travel back to the great river valleys. Egypt, along the Nile; Mesopotamia, cradled between the Tigris and the Euphrates; the Indus civilization in the west of India. Together with China, these were the earliest, the most important, and the most consequential steps humanity ever took beyond hunting and gathering. Each one built an organized economy, an elaborate theology, a steep ladder of rank and class, and each one bound the whole of human life together under a single sacred account of the world. In Egypt, the myths explained why the pharaoh himself was divine. In Mesopotamia, stories like the great epic of Gilgamesh explained why the existing political and moral order carried the sanction of the gods. And in the Indus cities, at Mohenjo-daro, something very much like this almost certainly held everything in its place. To question the myth was to question the whole cosmos: public life and private life, the law and the temple. All of it stood unified beneath one governing story. But the deepest feature of these worlds was their stillness. Historians of Egypt speak of its immobilism. One generation gave way to the next. One pharaoh succeeded another. Dynasties rose and fell, the royal names changed, and yet the underlying pattern of life remained almost exactly the same across thousands of years. Mesopotamia and India held just as fast. And in Plato's pages, you can feel a longing for precisely this: a yearning toward a permanence that Greece itself simply did not possess. Greece was a place of ceaseless change, of innovation, of dazzling, dangerous flux. Plato gazes back with something close to homesickness, toward stillness, toward a world where theology and politics and ethics all breathe as one. He is, in the truest sense, a backward-looking thinker, not backward as in foolish, backward as in turn toward the past, turn toward Egypt, as the very emblem of permanence. In the Laws, his final dialogue, the city that does not change is the good city. Once a sound order has been set in place, he warns, every innovation becomes a kind of poison. And this same longing governs his entire picture of what is real. He has little patience for the world of tables and chairs, the shifting world of space and time. He lifts his eyes instead to what can never change: the form of the good, the form of the beautiful, the form of the triangle and of the square. Squareness simply is what it is: fixed, perfect, a release from the whole world of flux and becoming. His vision gathers in still other ancient streams. One inheritance, which he shares with Parmenides and with Pythagoras, is a body of Orphic ideas that seem to flow, in the end, out of India and its Vedic wisdom. Reincarnation is not a native Greek thought. What Greece knew instead were the myths of circular time, the vast wheel of the cosmos, birth, death, judgment, and return, borrowed, it seems, from the river valleys and the doctrine of rebirth pointing toward India in particular. Plato would have been perfectly at home in the Egypt of the earliest dynasties. He wrote between roughly 400 and 350 BC, and yet his spirit was already archaic in his own day. Carry his political theory back to Egypt around 2500 BC, or to Mesopotamia around 3000 BC, and he would have felt entirely at ease. In a way, what he gives us is an improved Gilgamesh. He takes the oldest, most stable myth of the River Valley world, and he adds the one ingredient that is purely Greek: reason, the logos. To everything borrowed from India and Mesopotamia and Egypt, he joins a new kind of knowing, born in the Mediterranean, a knowledge that pushes past myth, past poetry, past mere persuasion, towards something final and genuinely logical. It is the unleashing of the human power to reason. And yet, his reason does not overthrow the ancient myths. It reaches back and reinforces them. But Plato's deepest aim was bolder than any of this. He set out to reconstitute Greek religion itself at the very hour it was breaking apart, to recover, at the last moment, a path back toward real knowledge and real moral order. For something had shattered the old faith. A centrifugal force, powerful enough to fling every Greek city-state into fragments. That force was Ionian physics, a cold, mechanical, materialistic new picture of nature, matter and motion, and nothing besides. It produced what we might call an empty universe. No gods, no divinity, no purpose, no meaning woven into things. And into that emptiness rushed the sophists, clever men who had learned how to talk, but had never learned how to think. This new physics quietly undermined the very myths that had held Greek society together, just as kindred myths held Egypt and Mesopotamia and India together. The older civilizations never had to face anything like this. No mechanical physics ever rose up to threaten their myths, and so they perpetuated themselves, century after century after century. Greece, by contrast, burned bright and brief, a breathtaking flowering of art and science and literature that proved in the end to be self-destructive, and Plato meant to save it. So he wove myth and reason back together to build a substitute for the religion of Homer, which had grown either offensive or simply unbelievable. In its place, he would raise something higher and finer. He would become the new Homer, the new teacher of all Greece. And where the old gods had stood, he set something far stranger: the forms. The forms are like the gods, but emptied of personality. The form of bravery is not the war god Ares, for courage is not some swaggering super soldier. The form of love is not the goddess Aphrodite. Plato takes the whole bright, quarrelsome pantheon and drains out the frailty, the jealousy, the all-too-human foible. He does not abolish the gods, he perfects them. His ambition is almost past believing, to be the supreme artist of his age, and he was, the supreme philosopher, and he was, but also a prophet, the one man who would rebuild a whole civilization's religion, restoring order first to the soul, and through the soul to the city. In anyone smaller, we would call this madness. In Plato, it is simply greatness. The late dialogues, written in his old age, somewhere between 65 and 80, reveal his purpose most clearly of all. The last of them, the Laws, very nearly rebuilds the river valleys on Greek soil. Its city could almost be Nineveh. It is governed like an immense solar calendar, turning with the seasons and the wheeling of the stars. Society itself becomes a microcosm, a small living model of the universe. This city may be the very last expression of the ancient solar myths, for the sun was worshipped in India, in Mesopotamia, and in Egypt alike. Plato takes that sun, shakes loose the old, arbitrary, quarreling sun gods clinging to it, and raises it into a pure and universal symbol of being, of goodness, of truth, of a reality that does not change. In this, he is the final stage of those myths. And the sun blazes all the way through the Republic and through the dialogues as a whole. It is no accident that he chooses the sun, the one thing that is unique and life-giving. For Plato, to know is to see. We see the truth, we see the form of the good, and blindness always signals a kind of moral darkness, as when Socrates draws his cloak up over his head in the Phaedrus. light and sight, darkness and blindness. With Plato, wherever these images appear, far more is at stake than first meets the eye. So, Plato comes forward as a savior in a Greece that is visibly falling. Athens has lost its long, ruinous war with Sparta. The city seethes with faction. The sophists corrupt her young men. Everything is sliding, slowly, toward nothing. And his answer is to reach back, across the centuries, to the oldest myths of all, the myths alive in the age of Gilgamesh, near 3000 BC, and to insist that they still speak to his own broken time. He stood as far from the world of Gilgamesh as we now stand from Plato, some 25 centuries in each direction, and so it is a deep mistake to picture him springing up out of nothing, fully formed, like Athena from the head of Zeus. He is the last and greatest heir of an immense tradition, and by rescuing it, he made it speak, not only to his age, but to every age that has come after, including our own. And make no mistake, across a career of some 50 years, ending only with his death at 80, Plato's thought did change. The questions themselves did not stand still. Any thinker of his gifts, if he is honest, revises his views over such a span. His answers sometimes shifted radically, as when he quietly abandoned the dream of the philosopher king. The Plato of the Laws is not the Plato of the Apology, nor of the Middle Years that gave us the Symposium and the Republic. And yet beneath the changing questions, the same few problems held him fast from first to last. Beneath all of it lies one last longing, the longing for harmony. For Plato, unhappiness and vice and ignorance are finally one thing, a sickness of the soul, a set of strings fallen out of tune. What he seeks is a kind of music, not music of sound, but of order, drawn down from the muses, tuning the soul as a hand tunes the strings of a lyre. And from the soul, he reaches outward to the city. As the soul, so the city. Heal the inner life, and you begin to heal the world. That, in the end, was the dream of the last archaic man.